Hey guys, what's up? This is Ryan here. If you guys are followers of this channel, you guys know that I live full-time in this big converted Sprinter van here. And in this video, I wanted to take some time to tell you about what I learned from my first full winter living in the van. Some context for people who are new to the channel. Maybe the algorithm has brought you here from the van life side of YouTube and not the ski mountaineering side of YouTube. My name is Ryan. I am based out of the New England area, primarily the White Mountains, and then in kind of spring, summer, fall, I'll guide in Acadia, but I'm doing most of my skiing in the New England area where it gets really cold, like negative temperatures consistently during the daytime cold. So most people that I've met who are doing the van life thing are climbers and are chasing warm weather, so they drive the circuit around the country, always looking for where rocks are going to be the warmest and driest. I don't actually know too many people who do the full-time van life thing who are based out of snowy regions. So I wanted to make this video about what I learned for anybody who is thinking of living in a snowier region or a colder region, to kind of help maybe clear up some of the problems that you guys might encounter in this this side of van lifing. Problems for me showed up this winter in two different categories, and I'm going to give some examples and how I solved them in each of these categories. Problem one is that heat does not distribute as well as you think it's going to in the van. Problem two, the van does not charge in any meaningful way off of your solar batteries. And those two problems are kind of interconnected, but this is kind of how it showed up for me. My van, for a little bit of context for those of you who don't know, I have a 30-gallon water tank that connects to this sink right here. I have a diesel heater that is involved in all of my climate controls, that is underneath this little bench here and is controlled by this dial. The diesel heater runs off of my diesel supply. I don't have to fuel it independently, but if my batteries are dead, nothing in the car. So if my batteries hit zero, I lose my heat. That's how I control the climate in this vehicle. Even when it's pretty cold out in the fall, it's done pretty good at keeping me warm, keeping this space cozy and pleasant to hang out in. But once I started getting into consistently living in snowy environments and having it be below zero and all the way into the negative temps outside, I noticed that the heat makes this kind of general living space in here pretty warm, but it doesn't reach the far side of the van. So if I had my heat at like a comfortable 65, which I run really hot, so I tend to sleep in as cold a conditions as I can without like actually needing a sleeping bag. When I had it running at 65, I was still having pipes that would freeze up on me. So for example, my water tank way in the very back of the van there has a pipe that's probably about 6 inches or so from the outside of the van. So even when I had the heat really cranking in here, I had a weekend where it was super cold and that pipe froze. That has kind of been the real challenge for me. And one way that I mitigated that is that when I would leave the van for the day, I would crank the heat up to 80 or 90 or so, just to try and keep things exceptionally warm in hopes that the heat, if it was 80 or 90 in here, maybe I could at least get it to be like above freezing in those kind of outskirts. Because the reality is, no matter how warm you get it, no matter how much insulation you put in your walls, you're still living in a metal box that's very prone to losing heat. So my goal was just to try and keep the outsides that are really prone to getting cold as warm as possible so those pipes could not get frozen. So if your pipes do freeze, here's kind of some tips for how to unfreeze them in a way that won't really damage your system. So the first thing that I did is crank the heat as high as I could get the van as hot as I could, and then my sink right here has this little handle. So when things are working, opening that doesn't take too much effort. So if you're finding any resistance in your sink handle, that means that it's probably frozen. Pulling it forward can just break it off. So what I would do during the day is I would get the heat as warm as possible, and then if I sensed any resistance in this handle, I wouldn't pull it. I would wait until that handle moved freely. Once I could get that handle to open, if I still didn't get water coming, I would leave it just kind of a little bit cracked, so that way once I did get a little bit of water flowing, it wouldn't all rush and burst. I would get just a slow trickle, and I could kind of gently bring the pipes back in to being in use again. Another way that this showed up for me is that a couple times I had my gray water tank freeze. A little bit more context. In my van, I have a gray water tank that's underneath the van, and it does have a heating pad, but the heating pad unfortunately was faulty and wasn't working this season, so that's a different story. Normally, it will have a heating pad that'll kick on automatically when it drops below freezing, and will keep that area from just becoming a huge block of ice. And then I have a switch where I can open it kind of whenever I want to. That way I can disperse my water when I'm driving on the highway. Normally, I keep that closed through much of the summer. But one thing I learned with cold weather van lifing is that it's really good practice to just have your gray water tank be open more often than not, because I don't have heating pads on every individual pipe. So while the gray water tank is supposed to warm up, the pipes, if the gray water tank gets overfilled and water starts to go back into those pipes, those can very easily freeze because those aren't climate controlled at all. So I had one instance where my sink wasn't draining, and it wasn't even draining slowly over time. The water was just filling up in the sink. And through some troubleshooting, I figured out that that pipe was frozen. Shout out to Bill for his quick responses in what the problem might be there. But basically, I just kind of had to wait for that pipe to thaw. I got really lucky and we had a natural thaw that allowed that pipe to thaw. Otherwise, I would have had to bring it into a garage or something and get a space heater and just blow it at that pipe in hopes that it would eventually thaw. So that could have been a really long issue for me, and I could have effectively not been able to use the sink until that fixed itself. Honestly, even with the trick of cranking your heat while you leave for the day to do activities and then turning it back down while you're living, if it's really, really cold, you can still deal with your pipes freezing. So having a stash of water like I have right here in that jug, so you can do your dishes, so you can have something to drink, is pretty essential. You wanna have fail-safes in place in case your pipes do freeze, because it's not unlikely. If you're in cold weather environments, it's actually quite likely. I also had issues with this jug here just because of its proximity to the door freezing up. It never froze fully unless I was gone for multiple days, but sometimes it would get slushy. So I would just boil a little bit of water on the stove and I would pour it into the cold water in my bottles. That way I could have room temperature water and not always have to be drinking ice. And on the subject of the stove, that kind of brings us to our next point here. This one's a little shorter, but that's power, and the crux being getting it. So I have solar panels. My solar panels are not on like an easel where I can aim them at the sun. My solar panels are flat to my roof, which means that for most of the year, I run fully on solar power. I get by pretty easily without having to do anything extra. I also charge off of the alternator, so if we have a particularly cloudy week, usually just the general driving I do is enough to keep my battery at a full charge, which allows me to run my induction cooktop, to charge all of my electronics, and to keep my heat going. Basically, my whole scene kind of runs on that. Because I can't aim my solar panels at the sun when the sun isn't getting very high in the sky, which for me I found to be from late October to early March, I get little to no charge whatsoever. And again, being in the Northeast, the New England area in the winter, we have a lot of really cloudy weather patterns. We have a lot of winter storms. So some days you're getting 0 at worst. Other days you're getting like maybe 3 or 4%. And that's if your solar panels are clean. I've had to go up on my roof with a spatula and chop ice off of my solar panels. So you're gonna have to get all of your power from the alternator or from plugging in. if you want to maintain a charge through the winter, which between cooking, boiling my water to make it drinkable, charging my electronics, and just doing normal human things, my power was always hovering kind of just above 0. And there was a couple times I did go out to ski for a day and come back and find that it did hit 0. The van was ice cold and all of my pipes were frozen. So to mitigate that, there's a couple strategies here. Last year, I got something installed in my van that is basically a converting system that allows me to plug into an electric vehicle charging station and charge my batteries through that. Luckily, most of those charging stations are free in the Mount Washington Valley, so I've had a really good time with being able to use those and not have it really cost me anything. Before I had that, I had the option to plug into a standard outlet, and I thought that this was going to be more reliable than it was. I mean, how many times have you charged your phone out in public? You don't think about it until you're limited by where you can park relative to an outlet with a 50-foot extension cord. And I got kicked out of quite a lot of places in Vegas when I was staying out in Red Rocks for trying to plug in at various outlets in town square, even though it probably cost them like a couple cents on the power bill compared to running that entire plaza. They really didn't like the idea that I was plugged in there. So having that option to charge EV throughout the winter was so game changer. I would say that it's even essential, especially if you're running an induction cooktop like I am, because that uses so much power. And I went from feeling like the ship was always moments from sinking to feeling like I could live pretty comfortable in here in the winter once I got that EV charging installed. Anyways, I hope you found this useful. I know this is a little bit off topic of what I usually do on this channel, but I wanted to share that here just because I know that others either aspire to the van life and are doing it and are maybe struggling through the winter scene as I was. I don't have all of my things figured out yet, so if you have any tips for me based on what I've said, feel free to leave them in the comments. And I have a Chick Chocks video coming soon, and I have a really cool video about how to use all the features on Backtrack that I'm also gonna make. This Chick Chocks video is gonna be kind of out of this world. It's not gonna be the best skiing ever, but I think it's a really good story, and I'm editing this the same way that I did my Svalbard and my Baffin video, where the expedition is one big trip and kind of weaves into this cohesive story. So I was really excited about making it, but it also means it just takes me more time and energy to chip away at, especially with all the music I'm gonna have to put in, all of the maps that I want to insert. It's just gonna be a really big project. So this is kind of a placeholder so I can keep my upload schedule. I hope you all enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.